Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live program for technical sales professionals and technical sales leaders. And folks, as I like to say, these are live conversations. We are coming to you live from the Washington, D.C. area and Columbus, Ohio, where they just had their weekly tornado test of the tornado warning system. Here we are 2 days before Halloween, but we're not going to be talking about too many scary things. At least I hope not.
I hope not.
And folks, as I like to say, these conversations are by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. Now, today's conversation might be a little predictable because I actually spoke with our guest a few weeks ago as I was on her LinkedIn Live, and we decided to sort of do a yours and mine. So she's agreed to come and be a guest. If you don't know her, her name is Arvi Carkanji.
Oh,
Did I get that right?
It.
Did I get it?
Yes.
She encouraged me to say it in the proper, and that's Armenian. Am I saying
Albanian?
Albanian. Yes. Sorry about that.
Yes.
So she challenged me to say it in the proper Albanian way. I'm glad I got that right. She is the founder of a company called Elite Talent, and she specializes in placing pre-sales professionals, post-sales professionals. I don't know if you work with sales professionals as well. We'll get to that in a moment. Arvi, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I'm excited to be on this side of the show where I'm not asking questions. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. So, Arvi, I think your story of getting into this line of work is in itself interesting. So, do you care to take just a minute and share how did you find yourself running now a business where you specialize in recruiting and placing sales engineers?
Yeah, what a great question. And thank you for asking that. So originally, I won't bore you with all the details, but originally I was in a completely different industry in real estate overall. Always dabbled with recruiting, HR within my career. And interestingly enough, I was looking for something to kind of branch myself and really help and grow, and something that was kind of underserved. I just didn't know what yet. And my cousin, I was actually talking to her, and she was like, I know that you have experience with recruiting. I know you know how to do it. Can you help me? Because I'm currently in a transition period. And I was like, sure, what do you do? And she was like, oh, I'm a sales engineer. And I was like, what? And obviously, we kind of started, I started understanding it a lot from there. I didn't even know, of course, that existed at the time.
Yeah.
And I just applied all of my recruiting experience, obviously, to this specific role. And we were doing all the outreach, reaching out to leaders, and I was helping her. So I was using my own LinkedIn as well to do that for her. And I started noticing like a pattern with a lot of leaders in the industry. And most of them were like, we don't really outsource with recruiters because they don't understand pre-sales. It's like a technical sales. It's not just sales, and it's not account management, and they need to have this type of background. And I was just extremely intrigued by that. I was like, wow, this is, a whole new world that I was just kind of opened up to. And when I would talk to recruiters for her or on her behalf, to help her out, they would say, well, we do some sales engineer roles like once a year. And I was like, what have you gotten yourself into? Like, is this even a role that like is very in demand out there?
Yeah.
But of course it was. And as I was fascinated by it at that point, and I just learned everything I could, been shadowing her at her job to really understand and all that stuff. So that's kind of what brought me here.
Amazing. By the way, Arvi, let me just pause to say hello to a few folks who are saying hello. Cliff from Richmond, Virginia. He is a frequent attendee. Cliff, always good to see you, my friend. Anna, nice to see you. And Satish from Toronto, welcome. Congrats on the way, by the way, on your Blue Jays victory last night. By the way, folks, we do not see you out there. So if you do care to say hello, please feel free to do so. And by all means, if you have any questions for Arvi, I'm sure she'd be happy to take them. Something you said, Arvi, as you were sharing your story, which I find so interesting, and it struck a particular nerve with me. You said you were looking for something that was underserved. Do you mind elaborating on that? Because that I find that particularly interesting.
So I knew I wanted to have like my own business. I just honestly didn't know what it could be. And obviously, like there's so many things out there. There's nothing really in a way new that you can invent. So I was like,
Mm,
okay, I'm not like the best at inventing stuff, but I know I'm good at operating, recruiting, HR. And I was like, I know I needed to be something along those lines.
mm,
And I was looking at just honestly different industries. I was like, okay, I do like this. I was like, maybe I'll do, accounting or, cybersecurity or something along those lines. And I just wasn't really finding much that I felt like really passionate about.
mm,
And really, like I said, when I started in the sales, like engineering, that's kind of like the first kind of contact I had with pre-sales. It was just underserved in the sense that it wasn't like a main focus. Like this role has just, I feel like, been up and coming a lot more in the past, let's just call it 5 years than it was before. And the fact that I never knew it existed, most people, even in software itself, don't know it exists until they,
it's crazy.
know somebody that's done it. I was like, this is a very interesting thing. And I was like, why don't people know about this?
Yeah.
It's a very highly paid role if you're with the right company. A very technical and sales background. I mean, super like unique skills. And I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And I actually made a post about it in the beginning. I was like, I want to make sure like everybody knows what a sales engineer is. I want like kids growing up to say, I want to be a sales engineer. Like they would say,
Mm,
I want to be a lawyer or I want to be, a doctor.
yeah.
So that's kind of like where that came from on my end. I've been fascinated with it ever since I found out about it. And I just, honestly, I love it.
It's such a great mindset and such a great mantra. And I think and the reason I double clicked on it is I think it's a great takeaway for anyone listening or anyone who may be listening to the recording who may find themselves in a similar situation that you found yourself in, wanting to do something different, looking for something new, maybe having that entrepreneurial bug, but not being sure what to start, and maybe being intimidated. Looking for something that's underserved, I think, is just a great mantra. So I'm glad you elaborated on that. By the way, Shannon DeCarmo is a friend who's not too far away. Shannon, nice to see you. Yes, she said it's the place for unicorns. Well
Yeah,
said. So Arvi, let's talk a little bit about the market first. Obviously, you are literally in the business of speaking with SE leaders and managers, recruiting teams, hiring managers, and you're in the business of placing people. What are you seeing in the market, and what are you hearing from managers?
Yeah, such a great question, Chris. And there's so many ways to kind of grab at it, but I'll start, kind of more generalized, and then we can hone in a little bit more. Overall, I will say this: the market this year is a lot better than it was last year when it comes to, being on the employee side and looking for a position. With that being said, and there's still tons of roles out there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, all kinds of companies are hiring. I think what's happening a lot in the market is confusion on the employee side, and in the sense of like there's a lot of AI happening, right? So they're just like, okay, I'm gonna click, 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 and apply to 20 roles at once. So this is making, I think, hiring managers very frustrated because they post a job live, they get 100 applications, and maybe one or two of those people are kind of relevant to the role. And
Mm,
then it's making the employees frustrated because they're applying to all these hundreds of jobs and getting no responses.
yeah.
So I think right now it's just like a lot happening with AI, and especially in the last few months, I would say it's become a lot better where employees are starting to understand, or if you're looking for a job, you're starting to understand like, okay, the easy apply button is just not the right way to do things. I need to do things differently. So if I could generalize it, that's what I would say I've noticed is happening right now.
Right. And I'll summarize what I'm hearing too. And this is insightful for me, is that because of the AI powered application tools, the amount of and the volume of applications and the noise that recruiting managers or hiring managers are getting. And then frankly, it's not, and you use the word employees a couple times. I think you mean the individuals who are looking
Correct.
for
Yes.
jobs, right? The candidates, if I can
The
use that
candidates,
term,
yes.
right? They're sort of spraying and praying as well. And so as a result, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of confusion, but you said it's starting to quiet down a little bit. By the way, I hope I'm saying this correctly. Maxime from Paris, welcome, Maxime. Glad you could join us. So you said that, and I could not agree more with this premise. We need to if we're looking for a new job, if we're looking, and I'm curious to hear from your experience, how many of the people that you're hearing from and dealing with are currently employed looking for new work versus out or between jobs looking for new work. But we'll get there in a minute.
Yeah.
What do you recommend the individuals who are looking maybe for a new job, rather than just clicking apply? What should we be doing then instead?
Yeah, great question. The first thing, it comes down to really understanding your skill set and what it is that you want to go into. I've talked to plenty of candidates where they're like, yeah, I could be a customer success manager, I could be a solution engineer, or I could go like into forward deployed engineers. And I'm like, those are three completely different things for the most part. Some companies kind of mix and match their definitions. But for the most part, three completely different things. So if you're going to decide that you can be either of those, or like you would be okay with either of those, you will need to, in a way, tailor your resume and your application to each of those. If you go on LinkedIn right now and just search customer success manager, you'll probably find hundreds of job listings on there. So imagine doing that for all three different roles, right? And that's why I think candidates and talent are just tired of it. Of course, I don't blame them if you're looking for it. And then it's like, okay, it's just easier to click apply and let's just see what happens. So the first things, I would just say hone in on what you actually want to do.
Yeah. The word that's coming to mind for me is clarity. Gain clarity on, and if I may, because I from time to time have people reaching out to me looking for advice, they're looking for work, etc. One of the things that I ask them, and I'm curious to see if this is decent advice because I'm not in your line of work. One of the things that I advise them is, what do you want to do on a day-to-day basis? What do you want to wake up and have on your list of things to do? Is this good advice?
Absolutely. I love that. Because sometimes, honestly, they might not even know what the title is for that position, but they can, what I call reverse engineer it and say, hey, this is everything I want to do on a day-to-day basis. Let me see what roles these fall under so that I can go search for those. I love that you said that.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, we just got a question, and it's a bit of a long question from, and I may have said Anna. It's probably Anna. So Anna, you can tell me if I'm saying it correctly or not. This is one of the things that we're going to discuss since Anna has brought it to the surface. Let's go there now. What is the best way to stand out for a professional looking to transition from a non-technical environment into a pre-sales engineering solution consulting role, especially high tech? How important are the soft skills? These are really good questions. And the best approach. So let's take this. And Anna, thank you for the question. Let's take this sort of one at a time here, Arvi. First of all, are you seeing a lot of people fall into this category where they're not necessarily in a technical or a sales engineer role looking to break into pre-sales?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of that. I'll have a lot of conversations daily or weekly of people saying, hey, I'm an account executive or I'm a customer success manager with no technical skills. How do I transition into something either pre or post sales that is more technical? There's a couple ways to look at it. And I'll tell you, if you don't have the technical skills, let's just say, like in Anna's case, she wants to go from a customer success manager to pre-sales. There's two ways you can go about it. One is you go the big corporate route, as I like to say it. These big corporations, big companies, they're willing to take you in, to train you on the technical skills, and they have usually the patience to do that, and the training, the enablement, the playbooks, the leadership, all of that to do it for you, or with you, I should say. Or the other way is if you wanted to be like, well, I do like the startup environment and all that stuff, then you have to hone in on the category of the industry.
Mm.
It is highly unlikely, and I'm just going to say highly unlikely, not impossible, because anything can happen, that let's just say a cybersecurity DevOps company is going to hire somebody with no technical skills in a startup world, because they're moving at 100 miles an hour. They need somebody ready to go plug in, get ready to sell by the next day. Corporations, big enterprises, they'll say, yeah, I'll come in. I have 2 months to train you, and then I can get you up to speed. From there, if you're like, yeah, still like the transition of like being in a small startup environment, then you can make that transition and you have the experience, you learn the technical skills, and you can move forward into different industries, in different types of startups. And the other way I would say is if you do like the startup environment, then you would go with an industry where it's less technical, right? Like MarTech. They don't necessarily need you to have high technical skills. They mainly look for those like soft skills, as she was mentioning about. So those are the two ways I would approach it. Hone in on that, look up companies and then just start researching and getting in front of those people.
Really, really love that advice, and I'll double down on that. I tell people similarly, and you mentioned cybersecurity, and I think cybersecurity is honestly it's the perfect example. If you're trying to break into pre-sales, sales engineering with a cybersecurity, or in fact, I think Maxime asked a question about data scientists, a big data or a hardcore or high tech data company, certain technical skills and experience, not just skills and knowledge, but it's experience, is going to be table stakes. So I think we're fooling ourselves if we think we can just break into a role. However, to your point, I love the idea of bigger companies. Hadn't really given that thought before. The other thing is there are countless other SaaS companies that sell business solutions,
Yeah.
right? And they hire from a wide variety of backgrounds and experience and expertise, et cetera. So I do think that that's great advice. Now, the second question, or the second part of honest question, and a question that Aman has asked, and Aman, thank you for your question. If coming from a technical background, networking, infrastructure, what's the skill set to further build? You mentioned soft skills. I spent a lot of time. In fact, I've built a business around teaching and developing soft skills for sales engineers, what we also call professional skills. Can you elaborate a little bit on what hiring managers are looking for, and are soft skills part of the package that they're looking for?
Yeah, before we move on to this, I'm going to add one last tip to the way you can break into the industry as well. Is if you are working with like a specific vendor, take two companies, you're in like one company and you're using this vendor that's maybe highly technical. So you understand the product, you understand all that stuff, then that is also a good way to go in and look at all your company's vendors and say, okay, I could go into 1, 2, 3, 4. The fact that you've used that product before, obviously kind of already gives you a little heads up in standing out. So just wanted to mention that because I forgot about that in a second.
Great. And I'll just piggyback on that for a moment. That is literally how I got into pre-sales. I was an enterprise architect. I became an expert in a very specific tool called, at the time, it was Popkin System Architect, which no longer exists because it was acquired, and then it was acquired, and then it was acquired. I think it may still be part of the IBM portfolio of tools, but that's exactly how I got into pre-sales. So it's a great observation.
Yep. Yes. And then moving on to this side of the questions, of course, the other part that they're going to definitely look for is the soft skills, is the customer experience. Again, one thing to keep in mind, I mainly work with startups because that's just my line of business. Mainly startups is who hire my services. But, and typically, honestly, they're looking for the full package. Like if you're coming from a highly technical role, typically they're going to ask that you have some sort of soft skills or customer presence. However, they will deviate from that if you're super like communicative, have great interpersonal skills. If you can really articulate yourself when you're talking, whether it's a recruiter or the direct hiring manager, they will deviate from that. Some people are naturals at it, right? So it's like easier for transition. One role, for example, that is a really good way of expressing like this is going to be the forward deployed engineers. A lot of the times when we're hiring for those types of roles for the companies we work with, they typically come from software engineers background, unless you were already a forward deployed engineer. In those scenarios, so again, like they don't have that customer facing experience, depending on what level of the company you're in. But if I jump on a call with them and they're super interpersonal, soft skills are there, then they're willing to overlook the fact that you've never been customer facing before.
Many of the SE leaders that I speak with, they usually have a framework that they work from. Some say it's the three. I can't tell you how many times I've heard them say it's the three-legged stool. It's the technical expertise and or the industry expertise. I think Shannon mentioned the industry that you have a background in. It's the soft skills, aka the interpersonal skills, as you mentioned, and then third is sales skills. And I think that third one, or we might also replace that with pre-sale skills. I think that's one that intimidates a lot of people. Two-part question. First is that pretty consistent with regards to what you're seeing in the market when you talk to SE leaders, that they sort of have a similar framework that they're working from? And then B, do you find people who are trying to break in, is that the element that they tend to be intimidated by?
I think you put it in a really good way, honestly, the three-legged stool, because that really sums up what most of my clients are looking for the most part. And if it's not like sales directly, it's like retention or, driving renewals. So similar to sales, either way. And so, I would say that's definitely, especially startups, they're looking for that full package, honestly, when it comes to, an individual joining their team. And again, going into big corporations, that three-legged stool probably comes more like a two now, where, you have either sales or technical or interpersonal skills with some sort of technical, and they can help you get there with the rest.
Well, and that was going to be my sort of a follow-on question is, back in like 2022, it seemed like hiring for this role exploded.
Yeah.
And it seemed like managers were willing to waive off one or two of the three if you had even a little bit of experience in the technology or a little bit of experience in the industry they were hiring. Then we saw a pretty big round of layoffs and shrinkage of the market. I think in 23, even 24, as you mentioned, things like so. Are you finding that managers are being a little bit more selective right now, or are they accepting people that maybe don't have all the skills or the experience that they're looking for?
I think you brought up a great question or aspect, Chris. Thanks for bringing that up, because I think it's super important to note. Yes, in a market where it's more of a employer's market, they're going to be way more picky. When it's an employee's market or a candidate's market where there's just too much demand, then they're going to lower their standards for sure. So the market definitely has a lot to do with it. And like you said, when it exploded in 22, and I mean, not just this role, I think that in all aspects, exactly. A lot of roles exploded that they were like, okay, that's fine. We can work with it. We'll train, we'll figure it out. Okay. And now it's more like, okay, it's not hitting, all 5 points. It's just not going to work for me.
Okay. So let's give anybody out there listening right now and anybody who may be catching this recording then some words of encouragement. Because what we just said is hiring managers are being a little bit pickier.
Yeah.
Given that that's the case, what then can we do to improve our chances of standing out so that because the first challenge is getting the attention of hiring managers and getting noticed, number one. And then number two, when we do get the opportunity to get in for an interview, is to successfully navigate the interview and sell ourselves. So let's give our audience some words of encouragement. What can they do to improve their chances?
Yeah, I'm going to start. There's a lot to do here, but I'm going to start with the foundations. The foundations for us are your resume and your LinkedIn profile. I tell everybody your LinkedIn profile is your personal landing page, so you have to treat it like one. Hiring managers are looking at that sometimes even more than resumes. There's been plenty of times where I'll show a LinkedIn like URL profile and they'll say, yeah, I don't need the resume. That's great. Bring him in front of me or her in front of me. So the LinkedIn profile is your personal landing page. That's just how it is. So what does that mean? A couple of quick things to do. One, a professional picture, make sure you're smiling, or if that's not your personality, just showcase your true personality on that main picture. Your about you section is not necessarily really about you. It's about, what you have done in your career, your outcomes, for other companies. So don't just talk about you. I know we love talking about ourselves at times, but if you're trying to stand out to hiring managers, they want to know about themselves. It's just how it is. Now, obviously, I always like to say, like, hey, include a little bit of your personality of like, hey, when I'm not working, this is what I like to do. I like hiking. I like walks with my dog or, spending time with family. I have a 3-year-old. Just personalize your profile a little bit on that end. And the last but the most important piece of it all is going to be your actual experience. The biggest mistake that I see everybody, even now that we're working on some roles, I wish that they would just do a little bit better, is that under their experience, they will usually give me a recap of what the company does. And that serves me no purpose. That serves a hiring manager no purpose. That should be 3 to 5 bullet points of everything that you've done for the company, outcome based, not I manage this, I do this on a daily basis. So how do we get to the outcome base? What I want everybody to do is take out either their phone or their website URL and go to ChatGPT or something AI based that you use on a daily basis. You can type it or you can voice it. I like to voice sometimes. So I would just take my phone and list everything that I do on my daily job, or that if you don't have one right now, what you've done in the past. These are my daily duties. I do this, I manage this, I am the liaison between these people, etc. Just list it and then give it the prompt to say, this is what I do in my job. I am looking to get into this type of job, and put the title. How do I make this? Give me 3 to 5 bullet points that are outcome based. And ChatGPT will help you relay all of that into an outcome base. A couple of things to note on that end is, anything that's like numbers based. So like I increased this amount of percentage. I increased this amount of ARR, or I managed this amount of ARR. Again, just think, what has the actions that you've taken resulted for the company? That is what outcome base is. So I'll stop here for a second and then we can dive a little bit deeper.
Well, you read my mind, because I was literally going to ask you, what do you think of using AI to help us update our LinkedIn?
You should absolutely
profiles.
do.
Okay. And you have been satisfied yourself with the results that you've been seeing from Chat or Copilot or whatever.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that all comes down to the way you prompt it when it comes to AI overall. So no matter what tool you use, the easiest way for anybody that's never used AI maybe before at this day and age, I would say talk to it like a friend. Like the same way you would talk to a friend of like how you're wanting things. If a friend can't understand what you're saying, then ChatGPT won't understand you either. So that's the easiest way I found to be able to prompt it right and get the outcome that I want.
Yeah, so good. And I have to be fully transparent, Arvi, and say that I find myself wondering, maybe it's time for me to just go. I'm not out looking for a job, but maybe I should be out updating my LinkedIn profile. So you've got me thinking. Arvi, let me just push pause just for a moment, folks. I'm speaking to Arvi Carkanji. Did I say it right again?
You missed it this time. It's okay.
It's
Carkanji.
Carkanji. Is that a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay. Well, in any event, I'm speaking to Arvi, and she is the founder of Elite Talent. She is an expert in placing pre-sales professionals. She works with hiring managers and she works with people looking for jobs. And we're talking about how we can stand out in this crowded market. We've had lots of really good questions. Maxime, you asked any advice on switching from a data science to a project manager role to an internal client or SE role. I hope we've helped you on that question. Anna, you've had some good observations. Let's see. Aman asked a question. Even if you have the soft skills and further sharpening, but not particularly in tech, how to stand out on the resume and applications between many other candidates who have customer-facing experience in tech. Do you care to touch on that a little bit, Arvi? So Aman's question is a little bit nuanced, and I think what he's asking is, so I don't have a lot of necessarily customer-facing experience. How can I stand out with the resume itself? I think that's the question.
Yeah, great question. I'm glad he asked that, because I think that also happens a lot. Is like, okay, I don't have this side, right? I'm out of the three-legged stool, I only have two. So how do I showcase for the third one? That's what I like to call objection blocking. So you already know that the hiring manager is going to have that objection going into it, looking at your resume. So how do we objection block the fact that although you haven't had customer facing experience, you are still good at communicating, showcasing your soft skills? The first thing you can do is a personable picture. I know it sounds like, well, what does that have to do with communication? Getting a good picture, professional picture on your resume gives you at least 2 to 3 extra seconds for a hiring manager to look at it. As a recruiter or as a hiring manager that's currently hiring, put yourself in our position. We're looking at resumes over and over again on a daily basis, right? And then the moment we see something colorful, we'll stop for a second and say, oh, what's this? Let me take a look. And now I'm focusing a little bit more, right? The picture is just to get you those 2 to 3 extra seconds. The second thing you can do is you can always put like a little at the top, when people have like a summary of themselves. This is where you can put a little bit of your interpersonal skills and your experience that, although you haven't had with customer facing, think about how you've done that in a personal level or with your coworkers. You can always say something funny like, oh, my coworkers think I'm, and insert something here when it comes to communication. And the third and the best way to do that, and again, I'm talking about stacking all of these up together, is what will make you really stand out. The third is you haven't had customer-facing experience, but you should showcase that you are good at those soft skills. So how do we do that? The best way to do that is through a Loom video. Showcase 30 seconds of yourself on a video about, it could be something about, what you do in your current job, why you're so excited moving on to the next opportunity, why you're looking for customer-facing experience. That is how you objection block all of these in like a piece of paper amongst everybody else. Somebody looking at this, and Chris, you may have been in a leadership position yourself where you've hired other people. You will say, okay, let me give this guy or this girl an extra chance because she took her time or they took their time to really put all this together. I know they haven't had customer facing experience, but maybe they're worth a phone call for me to see if they have that in them. And that's what you want. That's what a resume and a LinkedIn profile is supposed to do for you.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I have to be honest and say I was a horrible hiring manager. So it's one of the reasons I got out of management, because I would interview somebody and I would give them the benefit of the doubt, and as a result, I made some bad hiring decisions in my life. So I realized that was not one of my strong suits. So I've removed myself removed that from something I do. There's so many questions I want to ask you. So many things coming to mind in no particular order. We were talking about LinkedIn. How important is activity on LinkedIn? And do you find that in addition to and by the way, I love what you said, your about you shouldn't be about you. I mean,
yeah.
Some of the people listening to this, I know that they know that I love the term the disruptive truth. That was a disruptive truth for me. Your about you should not be about you. And the importance of making our experience not be a recap of the company, but a recap of what they have achieved from an outcome basis. building on that, how important is it to be active on LinkedIn? Do hiring managers also look at what are you putting out there? What is your activity?
Um, so yes, they do, but it doesn't go work against you in certain cases. So if you're like somebody that their LinkedIn is super updated, right, with all the things we talked about, outcome based, my profile's on point, my little headers on point, my about you is not about me, and you don't post, that's okay.
Okay.
LinkedIn hiring managers, they don't look at that.
Okay.
Um, if you are posting though, you should think about it in a sense of like, can this be used against me? We're
Okay.
human nature creatures, right? Like we're always going to look at that and say, I don't know if, and I don't know, it could be anything that you post about, right? I'm not saying don't post anything or that you should always post something that's a little disruptive, like you said, something that not everybody might necessarily agree with it. But if you're in a position where you're looking to get hired, you should think about all the things that a hiring manager is going to look at. So if you say something that's completely against their values, whatever that could be, they might skip on you because of that.
So in
So,
other words, if
yeah.
it's overly opinionated or if it's something that somebody could look at and take a very different stance, that could actually work against you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get like political, but like political points is like one of the biggest ones where
Mhm,
people will always disagree with each other, no matter how neutral you're
mhm.
trying to stay.
Yep.
So I would just prefer personally leave that outside of LinkedIn. Use that on Facebook or Instagram. I don't know, or maybe don't use it at all. That's fine.
Yeah.
But you need to think about those things because yes, it shouldn't be used against you. But again, we're human nature
Mhm.
people. We thrive on that, and if my core values are going to be completely different from yours, then I'm just not going to hire you. So
Yeah.
I think, again, just my personal opinion, I think something should just be let out of the hiring manager's point of view.
Yeah.
And think about it again, it's like your landing page, right? Would you put that on a website?
Yeah.
Chances are no.
Yeah. Something you struck a chord there. Something that comes to mind for me is that there's probably there's another side to that coin, which is if if you really do have some core values that you feel strongly about, and the individual that you may be interviewing with is opposed to or has a very different set of core values, maybe that's not a good fit anyways, right?
That is true. Yeah.
So to a certain degree, that it may close certain doors, but those may be doors that should be closed anyways, right? So I agree with what you're saying. I think we need to be careful about what we're putting out on LinkedIn. On the flip side, if you have a strong point of view, and I'll actually give you and our audience a perfect example. Ironically enough, before I launched this business, probably a year and a half before I launched this business, I was actually interviewing with a company who I will remain unnamed, who will remain unnamed, but it's a company that all of you would recognize. And at one point during the interview, they asked me for my sort of point of view about the pre-sales profession, and I shared the 6 habits. Now, ironically, at the time, they weren't called the 6 habits because I hadn't published the book yet, but
Yeah.
they were the framework through which I saw this profession. And the individuals that I were speaking with, they honestly they sort of dismissed it as overly simplistic. And so immediately right there, I knew, you know what, this is just not going to, this is not. And by the way, they seemed unimpressed. Now, the irony is I've published a book and launched a business around that point
Yeah.
of view, right? But anyway, so I think that's worth mentioning. I have another question, but I'm gonna hold on to it here
Okay.
because I see that there's also a question from my good friend Brian Oling, who, by the way, has also been on this show. And Anna, I see that you made a comment as well, so we're going to bring that up here in just a minute. Brian, I think, brings up a question that I bet other people are wondering, and I'm paraphrasing here, but within a day, in his words, within a day, LinkedIn shows 100 people have applied, and I think that could be very intimidating for people. I think the question is, does this indicate a broken system? And system big S, right?
Yeah.
How should we interpret that, and how do we break through that? Brian,
Yeah,
thank you for the question.
that's a great point, Brian. We touched on this a little bit at the beginning of the show where I literally said that's the biggest frustration right now between hiring managers and candidates applying through jobs. I don't know if there's any way where we can say like, unless LinkedIn comes up with something where it's like allow easy apply or things like that, right? Where those are things we can't really control. What we can really control, it is at least what I'm doing with my platform, is just trying to educate as much as I can when it comes on both sides, especially the candidate side, right? Because that's what their biggest frustration comes from, that easy click, so that you have 100 applications on that end. Right now, at least, I will say that nobody should be intimidated by LinkedIn's number saying 100 plus people applied for this job, as hiring managers do still want you to apply. So do not let yourself be intimidated by that, at least at this point in the market right now. And again, the other thing would just say it's just the education part. When it comes to the candidate side, is just really understanding that you easy applying to a job does not necessarily get you in front of that company. I've talked to plenty of candidates where I will see something and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. So they're not entirely what I want out of that person, but they're close enough, right? And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and I'll ask like, hey, I would love to schedule a call with you so we can see if this could be a good fit. And if I don't include the job description on there, 9 out of 10 times I'll get a response that says, yeah, which jobs is this for? Because I've applied to over 400 of them. And that right there is the problem. So educating and applying to things that actually match your skill set and not just because it's easy. So it's just going to come down to that, and it's going to take some time for everybody to adjust. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think candidates are already learning that that's not going to get them too far unless they're matching the skill set. And hiring managers are also learning that now, unfortunately, I have to go through 100 plus applications and resumes before I can find somebody good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the pray and spray, or
Yeah.
spray
Right.
and pray, spray and pray mentality. And I do think it's a problem. But again, Brian, I'm glad you asked, because I do think people are intimidated by that. And Anna, I'm going to get to your question in just a moment. And Wes, I see you put a question out there as well. We'll get there in just a moment. The related question that I have to Brian's question is, and I'll share it sort of from my perspective. I frequently have people reaching out to me saying, hey, Chris, I saw an opening at such and such company, and I see you're connected with so-and-so at that company. Would you be willing to make an introduction? And almost universally, the answer is always yes. I am more, and by the way, anybody who's listening to this live or anybody who's listening to the recording, if you see that I'm connected to somebody, and particularly if we have a business relationship, I am always more than happy to make introductions. My question is, I've often found myself thinking, in spite of the fact that I'm happy to make that introduction,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you just reach out to that individual yourself and say, hey, I saw that there was an opening. I'd like to introduce myself because I think there might be a fit there. Might you be willing to just take a 15 or 20 minute, or may I just ask you a few questions? My question for you is, given the pre-sales leaders or the leaders that you work with, do you think they would be open to people reaching out to them directly, or are there already 100 people also doing that and it's just too much?
Yeah, no, great question. Great question. So yes and no, absolutely. They might be slammed. They might see, people might see that they have listed the position, especially if they share it on their profile, and they'll get bogged down with like, 50 plus inbox emails or messages. And, it might just be that they need to stand out through the crowd. So I think that they should be doing both, in my opinion. So as long as somebody, for example, like yourself, is willing to make that warm intro, I think they should absolutely do that, and also reach out to them separately, because in that message response to yours, when you do that three-way intro, you can say, hey, I also reached out to you, on this date. You're probably busy, haven't seen my message. So I figured, I would reach out to Chris and see if he could help us. And just something like that, right? And what I would say is, you shouldn't necessarily go and ask them to jump on a call with you, especially if they're currently hiring. just because they're already like trying to do that to begin with, right? And they don't want to waste their time. Plus, they have other responsibilities, right? They're not just there hiring, unless you're a recruiter, of course. But at that point, they should say, here's my application, here's my resume for your reference one more time. Give them some time to relook at things, right? And then see if there could be a good fit. Otherwise, follow up, find their email. It's easier to do that nowadays with all the enrichment tools that are there. So find their email, send them an email, try to reach out. Honestly, even call. If you really love that position and that company, do whatever it is that you have in your hands, in your power to get in front of that person.
Yeah.
And what I like to do is, if you're going to do that, make sure that you mention the amount of times that you try to reach out to them, because that shows your persistence.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, I'm calling you. I've emailed you 3 times. I've sent you 2 DMs. I haven't heard back. This is why I'm calling. Yeah. And now you've got attention, right? You'll be like, okay, let's see what this is about.
Yeah. And it's a fine balance. I mean, here's the unfortunate truth is, in essence, we are selling ourselves, and we basically become a prospector, just like the BDRs that we get tired of hearing from on LinkedIn and in email, right? So there really is a fine balance. I think we want to show initiative. Yeah. We want to show enthusiasm, but we don't want it to become burdensome, right? So I think it's striking that balance. And to one of the very first points that you made, I think we need to have clarity on our skill set, clarity on what it is that we think we want to do, clarity on what we think we have to offer, and do the research necessary to determine that I really think there's a good fit here, right?
Yeah.
If it's sort of, well, let's just roll the dice and take a chance, that's probably where not exactly where you want to be overly assertive or overly energetic and enthusiastic. Okay. I still have more questions, but I want to honor the questions that are coming in. And by the way, folks, I love all the chat and all the questions. So Anna, and I'm summarizing here, it sounds like she's practicing her delivery. She's practicing giving demos in different contexts, with different stakeholders, and she's recording herself. I think the question is this something that she should and could use with potential hiring managers? Might this be a tool that would, add to her, sort of the package of her resume or her application?
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that, honestly. That's something you can include. So instead of a Loom video, for example, you can include a link to that. Most PDFs, well, I should say all of them really, they let you like hyperlink, right? And you can click and just go straight to the video.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a great idea. So it's not that I said, Loom video and you'll have to present yourself that way. Whatever it is where you can showcase your skill set. And if that's a demo practice, then I think that's great too.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And we were just talking about reaching out directly to somebody on LinkedIn. I think even just rather than a typed message, maybe a 20 or 30-second recorded video, right? Hey, Arvi, just wanted to reach out. I saw there was a posting. My name's Chris. Here are the reasons why I think it might be a good fit, and would love to send you my resume if I may, right? Something of that nature. That is how we stand out. That's how we differentiate ourselves. And by the way, it's not easy. I want to make it clear that some of the things that we're talking about, it's not like we're trying to make it sound easy. Believe me, it's uncomfortable. I know this firsthand. Arvi, you know this firsthand. Just anytime you put yourself out there, not unlike this very conversation that you and I are having, is uncomfortable, particularly when you first start doing it. I've become a little bit more comfortable seeing myself on video, but I'm certainly not, like it's not what I wake up and like yearn to do everything. Okay. There was another question from Wes. Wes, thank you for the question, which also I think is one that may be on other people's minds. If I'm customizing a resume for each job, how do I balance what I put on my LinkedIn profile? Really, really insightful question.
Yeah, I think this is where the biggest misconception comes in, is you don't have to tweak your resume to every job. if your skill set matches the job description, then you don't necessarily have to tweak it, right? Like if the job description requires for you to have, cloud environment experience or, pre-sales leadership, I'm just naming a couple of things, and you've never done that, if that's a requirement, the chances of them picking you are going to be very low. So you don't need to tweak that. So I mean that's really my answer to that is that's why we talked about in the beginning, like gaining clarity.
Mm.
Because if you gain that clarity, you know what you're applying to, and you shouldn't be or you shouldn't need to tweak your resume for every single job. Now, if you're like, hey, I want to be a customer success manager, or I could be a pre-sales person, then yeah, then you can have two different types of resumes. But again, you shouldn't be needing to tweak for every single job for customer success and for every single job for solutions engineers. I hope that's a good answer, but that is my honest advice.
Well, and here's the way I interpret that is that each resume is a lens into this individual. And
Mm-hmm.
and when I look at this resume, that lens should not be different or contradict anything that I'm seeing in the LinkedIn
Correct. Yeah.
profile. And I might have a blue lens, a green lens, and
Yeah.
a red lens, right? So I'm seeing slightly different perspectives, but it's still the
The
same
same.
person. and along those lines, and I don't know what triggered this thought, but I think it's worth sharing. One of the questions that I've heard interviewers ask me a number of times, and as such, something that I've encouraged people to consider. I've had people just simply say, "Tell me your story.
Mm.
Help me understand your professional story. Help me understand your professional journey. Take me through the steps that you've gone through." And because I think what that does is it paints a picture and it helps the potential hiring manager understand why a job with them might be the logical or a logical next step. So that's one question I encourage you all, anybody who's out there trying to pitch, trying to present themselves, trying to market themselves, think through your story. There should be a common thread. There should be a common theme. I should be able to make sense of it in some way. And by the way, maybe you took a dramatic right turn at some point in your career and then a dramatic left turn in your career. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Just make sure you have a story, because to me, it's that story that explains who you are. By the way, and Arvi, I mean, you had me on your show a few weeks ago, and you sort of asked me about my background and how did I get to where I got to. I took a couple of left turns and a couple of right turns, but that's part of my story. And that's a big part of explaining where I am and why I'm where I am today. So I don't know, that thought just occurred to me.
I love that. I'm going to add one thing to that is the hardest thing that people sometimes have trouble with is selling yourself. So that tell me about you question is like, it's so scary.
It is.
The only way to not let that question be scary and nail it every single time is practice. Before you get into an interview, we are way more comfortable to talk about our skill set. If we know this technical skill, if we know this, what we've done, the tasks, etc. But the second they ask about you, it's like, oh, I don't know. And then you just end up spilling like 10 years of your life into like 20 minutes, and the hiring manager's there listening like, what did I just even hear? I don't know. And that could be a turnoff. Yeah. So again, this is where ChatGPT can come into place, or whatever other AI tool that you use. Spill your beans on a voice note. It's just easier for me. You can type it out, say, this is my entire career from personal to where I'm at right now. Give me a 30-second summary of, professional mixed with like a tiny bit of personal. And then when you're saying that in your interview process, you can say, hey, this is my 30-second summary. Is there a particular area that you want me to dive deeper into? Or even better, if you know what the company is going to be more keen on, dive deeper into that specific area, right? And then for the next company, you can dive deeper into the other area to make sure you adjust your skill set. Because like you said, you can look into all these different color lenses, but at the end of the day, it's still your background. So you highlight what is important to them.
Such good advice. Practice telling your story.
Yeah.
So I probably have far too many questions before we wrap up. And by the way, I can't believe we've been at this for almost an hour. So I have two completely and totally random thoughts. I hope they're helpful. The first is probably an easy one. How important or how valuable is, you mentioned a sort of a personal note. Is that helpful? Like for example, I'll give you just a perfect example. I'm an avid wake surfer. That just happens to be one of my passions. Like if I were to say something like that, like on my profile or on LinkedIn or something like that, is that the kind of thing you're talking about that just kind of makes you sound a little bit different and a little bit human compared to others?
Absolutely. For sure. I mean, whatever it is that I wouldn't say like, don't make it generic, right? Like I like to go on walks with my dog. So do millions of other people, right? I like to play with my son. So do millions of other people.
Something that's unique.
Yes, something that's unique about you. One thing that even on my LinkedIn lives, when I'm literally talking to other leaders and I ask them the question of like, what makes them stand out? Everybody will say like, well, actually I had a hiring manager or solutions engineer manager from Gong in my show. And when I asked him, he said, well, somebody said on their resume that they know how to play a violin. He was like, that was cool. Made me personable. He fit the other skill set. I jumped on a call with him. Another person could be like Chris, avid surfer. That's cool. You don't really hear that a lot. So let me, again, it's just about personalizing those, and how the thought should be, how can I grab this person that's looking at my piece of paper's attention for an extra 3 to 5 seconds? Because 3 to 5 seconds turns into 5 minutes, and then it turns into a yes or no. But either way, you've done your job.
Yeah. The final question, I heard a number of years ago that if you're looking for a job, you should, and the person I was talking to said the mistake that everybody makes is they apply for jobs. And she said, my advice is do your research first and then connect with people in the organizations that you've identified. And then once you've made that connection and they know who you are, then apply. And that advice is probably 15 or 20 years old. Does that advice still apply?
Yeah. I will say it's changed a little bit. I think the principle and the foundation is still there. I don't think that the way the market is right now, at least, that you should wait to apply. You kind of do all those things at once, in my opinion, right? Like, I think when people think of the word research, that they have to like do all this in depth of like, oh my gosh, I have to look at all these pages, do a summary, no, it's just learning. Okay, the company is a DevOps. Do I have any skill set in DevOps? Would I like working there? Yes, no, move on, right? That's the type of research you should really be doing. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, you can see the employees for every company, figure out 2 to 3 managers, and then you reach out to them. Because if they say no, then you can say, okay, is there another, and always ask for referrals, by the way. I forgot to mention this. A hiring manager says no. Don't take it personal. Maybe they found somebody that's a better fit. Just ask, hey, do you know anybody else that's hiring that I should potentially reach out to? If they answer, that's great for you. If they don't answer, you have nothing else to lose either way.
Yeah. One final question from the audience. Aman says, yes. I've done a little bit of real estate investing, interview many investors, business owners over my own podcast. Does that align anywhere and stand out in SE roles? I actually think yes, but what do you think? Is that something that?
Yeah, I think this could be part of that unique thing that we talked about. Like, hey, I'm a solution engineer, but on the side I do investing, or I have a podcast about investing, or whatever that looks like. That's unique. That stands out. So yeah, why not?
And it shows a business acumen. So
absolutely.
An inherent business acumen. So I think, Aman, thank you for asking that question as we're wrapping up. I think that's a great example. Arvi, This has been just an absolute delight. I'm sorry that we've run out of time, because I try to keep these to an hour. I feel like you and I could go for another hour, and for crying out loud, you and I already talked for an hour.
Or another.
So I hope you'll come back
Yeah.
and join me. In fact, I'd love to bring you back. And we've talked a lot about people who are trying to break into pre-sales. And I feel like we've talked more about people who are maybe out of work, looking for work. I'd love to have you back and talk about how do those of us who are potentially in a role, but maybe feeling like we need to change, how do we, because that's a different situation. Different
No, I'd love
to navigate. So any closing words, Arvi, before we put a bow on today's conversation?
Yeah, I will just say that, especially if you're out there looking for an opportunity, or a new job, is one. I know it's really hard because we're human beings, but just don't take it personal. If you went to your dream company with the exact amount of skill set that they need and they said no for some reason, one, they could have just found somebody that was in a little bit better position, and two, learn from it what it is that you could have done better. So still reach out to the hiring manager if you can, or people in that company, and really ask, like, hey, I know I had this and that. What did you miss from me that I could do better? People will love to do that for you. So I think, that's important. Don't take it personal. Ask for feedback when you can. And then the other biggest thing from this show today was clarity. Gain clarity of where you want to go so that you can actually apply to those specific jobs and keep track of them. I actually had a candidate once that we placed him. He started the job and he was like, wow, Arvi, like, I can finally close out my Excel sheet of like 10 different tabs of all these applications that I had going on. So be organized and follow up like it's your job, because at that point it is.
Yeah. I mean, it is a sales job. It
Yes.
really is. You have to keep track of your prospects and your proposals.
For sure.
And yeah. So excellent. And fair to say, Arvi, that if anybody who has been on today's conversation or catches the recording, you'd be happy to have them reach out to you on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you so much for being here, folks. For those of you who were here with us live, Aman and Anna and Brian and Cliff and Wes and Aman and Maxine, thank you so much for all your comments and your questions.
Thank you, guys.
It's been a fun conversation. If you are new to Tech Sales Advice, I will encourage you to check out hashtag Tech Sales Advice. In fact, you can go to Tech Sales Advice, the page, and follow the page. Of course, if you care to learn more about the work that I do, you can go to techsalesmastery.com. And your website, Arvi, is what? Elite Talent?
Recruiting.io.
Recruiting.io. Just that simple. Excellent.
No, Elite Talent Recruiting.io. Sorry.
Recruiting.io. Okay. Thank you. Elite Talent Recruiting.io.
Yeah.
I encourage you to check out her website as well. And folks, we will be back. I think I'll be back. If not next week, I'll be back in 2 weeks with the next edition of Tech Sales Advice. Arvi, hang around backstage just for a moment so we can part ways properly. To everyone else, thank you so much. Have a safe Halloween for those of you who celebrate that, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Thanks all.